Last November, I had the opportunity to travel to Israel, just about 6 short weeks after the atrocities of October 7th. Landing in Israel was surreal. The usually bustling city of Tel Aviv was eerily quiet. And it wasn't just the physical space that felt vacant. It was something deeper, like the air itself carried a heaviness. It was impossible for me to shake these feelings of loss and fear and uncertainty that were lingering in the air. It wasn't until dinner that night that I started to settle in. I was at a fun restaurant with dear friends. We were laughing, we were drinking a good bottle of wine, and catching each other up on how our families were doing. And for a moment, I felt some semblance of normalcy. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my friend Shani's wrist. And as I processed what I saw, I looked closer, almost in disbelief. She had a colorful bracelet on that looked like one you would get at a festival. Wait, Shani, were you at the Nova Festival 6 weeks ago? And she looked at me, and she laughed because she would never be caught dead at a music festival, and said, "No, don't worry, just read it." And so the bracelet read, Ad shekulam kan, kulanu adayin sham. Until they are all here, we are all still there. Over 200 people that day were violently taken by Hamas. And without words, I knew that this bracelet was a sign of solidarity. Until they are all safely home, we are all still there, reliving October 7th, day after day. And this bracelet, it's not actually just a reminder of all the hostages. It's a reminder of our collective responsibility. Kol Yisrael Aravim Ze Bazeh. It means that all of Israel is responsible for one another, and that we are all bound to each other in times of joy and in times of sorrow. She said, "Actually, I have an extra one. Do you want it?" Of course, I said. So this bracelet has been on my wrist ever since that night in November. It stays wet way longer than after I wash my hands. It's definitely falling apart. And I'm not entirely sure that I care because I can't take it off. I was at a doctor's appointment a couple weeks ago and the nurse said to me, "We have to cut it off because we have to use your arm for a test." And I said, "Use my other arm. Figure it out. You can't cut this bracelet. It has to stay on until they're all home." And just as this bracelet remains on my wrist, so does the commitment and the responsibility to remember. This is just a tangible symbol of the collective responsibility that binds us all together. And today, on Yom Kippur, this call to responsibility is amplified. We reflect not just on our own wrongdoings, but also on the collective healing and forgiveness that we must seek as a people. Everyone in Israel feels connected to those held in captivity, regardless of whether they know them personally. They are known by story, by posters, by their names on the news ticker at the bottom of a screen, and on and on and on. We will never forget them, and we will never leave them behind. When I look down at this bracelet, I am reminded that the 6,500 miles between Boca Raton and Tel Aviv have nothing on the connection that we can have to the state of Israel. From my earliest memories, I understood that part of what makes Judaism unique is this sense of collectivity. We don't just exist as individuals. We are connected. We are bound together in profound and lasting ways. This sense of belonging, this shared responsibility, it's been ingrained in me from a young age. I think especially as a rabbi's kid, people I don't know still tell me, and now more often they tell my parents, how proud they are of me. It doesn't matter that I don't know these people, or that I have not lived in Sacramento in more than 10 years. I'm still one of their kids. That's Jewish collectivity. It transcends time and space and familiarity. And this feeling of connection, it stretches across the oceans and throughout the generations. In Israel, they talk about all of the soldiers as their kids, fighting to defend the state of Israel. And although I don't have children of my own, I do know what it feels like to have hundreds of kids. When a student in religious school says, Rabbi Elana, I have a question, or when I see them the day after their bar mitzvah, or when the toddler shares about their day with me and their accomplishments, I feel that same sense of mutual care and responsibility. That's why it was so important to go to Israel last November. It wasn't just another trip, but it was a tangible expression of a deep connection to a people. And it might feel like this relationship becomes even more critical in moments of crisis. When tragedy strikes, like the horrors of October 7th, Kol Yisrael Aravim Zeh Bazeh might feel like it takes on a deeper, more immediate meaning. I remember reading the news late at night on October 6th and early into the morning on October 7th, tossing and turning in disbelief, fear, and denial, unable to grasp the total weight of what was happening. Just was refreshing and refreshing and refreshing the news, hoping it was a bad dream. And then at 5:57 in the morning, I sent a text without really understanding the gravity of what it meant. It said, really bad news from Israel this morning. Headlines: Hamas has invaded from air, land, and sea. They're in several towns in the south. Thousands of rockets, hitting all the way up to Tel Aviv and Mevaseret Zion. Captured civilians and soldiers, as many as 35 civilians. Israel at war. But at 5:57 in the morning on October 7th, how could we have known what that really meant? We only knew at that time what we felt, and in those immediate days that followed, feelings of pain, of grief, denial, fear, sadness, anger. And the pit in my stomach that is holding all of those feelings hasn't left me since that day. And while my trip was already scheduled through a fellowship that I've been a part of for the last year, being there after this attack felt like a necessary act of solidarity. My connection to Israel transformed from a generally positive piece of my identity to a feeling of urgent responsibility to be present and hug my people. But see, this is our responsibility to the people of Israel always, in joy and celebration, and in moments of pain and crisis. We need a minyan, a quorum of at least 10 people, not just to recite the words of Kaddish after a loss, but also to recite the 7 traditional blessings given at a wedding, and to share and engage in the words of Torah. Judaism is not a religion that can be practiced alone. On Yom Kippur, on this holy day of atonement and teshuvah, we are reminded that more than ever, the power of our interconnectedness. Yom Kippur is not just a time of personal reflection, but a sacred day of communal accountability. Tomorrow morning, we will read the powerful words from Nitzavim, Atem Nitzavim Hayom Kulchem. You stand here on this day, all of you. Today, we come together and we stand before God and each other, knowing that our actions, our mistakes, our growth, and our efforts to repair deeply affect those around us. We don't exist in isolation, and neither does our behavior. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel reminds us that few might be guilty, but all are responsible. His words carry this essential truth that even when we are not directly involved in something, we still carry responsibility for the world and how we create it through our actions, through our inactions, how we lift up others, and when we turn a blind eye to injustice. We are accountable not just for what we do, but also for what we fail to do, for the moments when we could have spoken up, when we could have intervened, but instead chose silence and indifference. Each of us is bound together through this sacred responsibility. And on Yom Kippur, we do not just ask for forgiveness for ourselves. We ask for the strength to repair what is broken between us, our community, and the world at large. When we say Kol Yisrael Aravim Ze Bazeh, the rabbis teach that we are Aravim, we are guarantors, bound by a shared responsibility for one another. Our actions ripple outward, impacting those around us, just as the actions of other people affect us too. That is why on Yom Kippur we confess in the plural, Achet shechatanu lefanecha, for the sins that we have committed, because none of us can live in isolation. We are interconnected and we are accountable not only for our own missteps, but for the shortcomings of others. We carry that weight of responsibility together, knowing that healing and forgiveness can also be a communal effort when we try. Each of us is bound by this sacred covenant and accountability, and it calls on us to lift each other up, to share the burden and make it not so heavy on one person. And today, on the holiest of days, we don't just ask for forgiveness for ourselves. We ask for the strength. We ask for the courage to repair what is broken within us, between us, and with our relationships with the divine. See, teshuvah is not just an individual act. It is communal. We each have work that we can do to make this a better year, whether it's through acts of kindness, standing up for those who are vulnerable, or mending relationships in our own lives. We are all partners in this work, bound by love and responsibility and a shared commitment to improve this world, because how many of you came in here saying it was broken? We are each other's guarantors in making this world more just, more compassionate, and more whole. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "In a real sense, all of life is interrelated. All men are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. And you can never be what you ought to be until I am what I ought to be. Until they are all here, we are all still there." This is the essence of Yom Kippur. We cannot become whole until we each do our part to lift up one another, to confront our own failures, and to make this world just a little bit better. It's how we move forward from strength to strength, simply by committing to being better. And striving to being our most authentic selves, we then hold the power to help one another do the same. And through this collective journey of growth and healing, we can transform the world around us. So let us commit on this day to making it a better year, not just for ourselves, but for the world around us. Together, we will make this a Shana Tova Yoter, a better year than the one we are leaving behind. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may that be God's will.